Well, welcome everyone to another Horizon Scan. Today, Peter and I are joined by Alasdair, who is the founder and CEO of Reveal Media, a fast-growing tech company specialising in body-worn video. So thanks for your time, Alasdair. And perhaps you can get us started and really set the scene for us today. You know, what does the business look like today? Or maybe I should say before the lockdown.
Thank you very much for having me, Peter and Simon. The business today, or as you said, before COVID, we're about 70 people. We're 18 years old. We have operations headquartered in the UK. We have offices in Shenzhen, which is where we do our manufacturing and logistics. We have an office in Hong Kong, which is where we have some of our production team and developers. And we also have a small office in America, which is purely a sales related office. And we have a GmbH in Germany, which deals with most of our European customers. And in terms of the way the business was going before, we are a high growth business. I think our average growth each year is in the region of 20 to 30%. So we're bringing on lots of people the whole time. The market is growing very substantially. So we were in a great place. To be a British company in tech is somewhat unusual. To have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to fulfill a market as one of the final independent providers of this kind of thing is a fantastic opportunity. So it's a great fun business to be involved in.
Just give us a feeling for the kinds of customers that you serve, where they are, what their size is, how you interact with them, what kind of stuff.
Yeah. So our key customer base is police generally, and that's where it tends to start in new territories. But we've got many thousands of customers outside of police. So police tend to buy the biggest number because of the way their organizations are, certainly in the UK. So a typical police size or police force might be, let's say 3,000 or 4,000 officers, generally speaking, a normal size. So we would expect to sell 3,000 or 4,000 cameras and the licenses there. After that, the most organizations get relatively small to that. So we've got traffic wardens, we have a lot in corrections, we've got lots of local councils. And then we go even to smaller businesses, which might be private security, and so on. And recently we've got into the healthcare, education and retail market, which is something that Reveal has really put a lot of effort into. We're finding a market for any person who gets into an altercation as either part of their job or as a consequence of their job. And we're finding business across a broad spectrum of customers.
So I guess then with manufacturing in China and around the place and customers in goodness knows how many markets in the world, you spend a lot of time on your aircraft going one way or the other. And before lockdown, you were in an office with people around you, I guess. But my guess is also that in today's world, you were already doing a good deal of that online. Give us a feeling for what.
Yeah, well, you're right. Before, obviously, you're absolutely right. Our sales staff and myself, we would be on planes a lot for different reasons. In my case, I'm very involved in the product development side. So I was spending at least a week a month, I would say, over in China and Shenzhen and Hong Kong, etc. But we had to get used to, before that, we have run large teams abroad. So we've got salespeople in India, Australia, as I said, America, and the development in China. So we've had to do a lot of that anyway. But it's hard to develop a product when you need to touch and feel something through a voice call or a video call, etc. So that's the thing that we've missed most in not being able to travel abroad.
So when was the first hint that you couldn't just carry on and business as normal?
First indication, I think, was when we heard the rumblings that things were going on in China. I do remember thinking that can't be good. I only imagined that it would affect our supply. I had no idea that it was going to come this far and be this profound. I'm not sure many people did, but it was absolutely it was the response in China that was our first wake-up call.
And what was I mean, did you call a crisis meeting internally when all this began to be clear? Was it?
Yeah, well, there's been so many crisis meetings since, it's hard to remember. I don't honestly remember. I mean, it was certainly extremely important. And when I think the factories themselves said we're closing down for a bit, then it was like, okay, what are we going to do? So we would have gone into some mode where okay, what are we going to do about this? In retrospect, it was a very quick bounce back. We only actually lost a couple of weeks because it coincided with Chinese New Year. So there was that lull in production anyway, which we have to build into the business. And that started, as you probably remember, going into Chinese New Year, didn't know what was going to happen out of it. There wasn't very much information. And it was only when they drifted back to work or didn't that we would really understand the nature of it. But actually, they pretty much got themselves back to enough capacity to satisfy us within several weeks. Nothing like the pause that we've had here.
And internally, what did it mean? How did you feel prepared for this, or did it take you completely?
Well, we've had a number of good luck strokes. I mean, the timing of this was good for us because, as I said, Chinese New Year is a lull in our ability to get goods. So what we do is we stockpile well in advance of Christmas because it creates this almost a quarter of we can't get stuff. So it's our moment of maximum stock availability just before Chinese New Year. So when it was clear that there was going to be some disruption, we were fortuitously in a position where we had a lot of stock that we could play with, hoping that they would ramp up, and they did. We've had no stock issues because of this, which is a minor miracle, frankly.
Young companies always make things up as they go along. Do you feel that you made any fortuitous preparation here?
As it's turned out, we were extremely fortuitous. About a year ago, we went through our ISO 27001 accreditation, and part of that is business continuity planning, as you probably know. So we had a plan that didn't foretell this kind of problem, but supposed that we wouldn't have an office. So we were already on the path of cloud-based services, so our Office 365 and our CRM and our finance has all been cloud for some time. So we were pretty nimble. We only really had the internal infrastructure was a few servers ourselves. And the other thing beyond the business continuity plan was that, again, completely circumstantially, we had changed offices just before lockdown. So the very fact that you have to uproot from one office that you've been used to for, what was it, 5-10 years, to another made us quite nimble because we actually had a bit of a work from home as we settled into this new routine whilst we shifted things around. So yeah, by a bit of fortuitous luck, we were fairly well practiced and prepared. So from that perspective, from the IT perspective, it was incredibly easy for us to perform.
And is that primarily because you pretty much got most of the processes sorted out before this happened?
Yep.
So you weren't trying to work them out on the fly?
Yep. As I say, the business continuity plan itself was really what we did. We just enacted that. So yeah, we were prepared.
So I'm keen to hear how this has changed your day. You know, this is how the way I run my tech business. How do you run your tech business, and how's your day changed?
Well, what was so wonderful about this was that the whole world more or less was thrown in at the same time. So suppliers, customers, us as a business, everything had to go work from home. I'm not sure that we could ever have, well, certainly couldn't have happened this quickly, could it, without? So how is life today? Well, it's of course like most other businesses. It's end-to-end meetings of one kind or another, video related, whether it's Zoom, Teams or Google, whatever, can't go to Shenzhen and do our normal stuff with the development side. So it has had to get more organized, more structured, more meetings, because what you would do, more meetings of this kind of nature, because you have to replace face-to-face conversational style meetings with much more structured meetings where there is an agenda and there's minutes sent out afterwards. So I would say there's been a huge benefit in this in terms for me. I don't like them, the fact that it seems to be endless meetings, which is one thing. And I think everyone's just found that. I don't know why. I don't know whether because it's so rigid and structured, you're very aware that you're in meetings. Whereas sometimes meetings in the real world drift from one to another and people come in for different, it just doesn't feel as staccato as it does nowadays. But I'd say on the whole, I think there's been some profound benefits for us as a business, and I think for people generally. The work from home ethic is all the work from home opportunities are absolutely there. It hasn't affected us negatively, other than I would say it's hard to push forward product, which is a very tactile thing.
And in terms of making your decisions in the business, how's it changed that?
Definitely changed my view on how to run a business in terms of the people and where we should perform our business. Absolutely. I've completely changed my view on the merits of working from home.
I was going to say, were you resistant to people working from home before?
Yeah, of course. If a salesperson in an interview's first question was, what's your work from home policy, or it was a short interview, and that's a rather old fashioned. But I was of the opinion that it was important for everyone to feel the vibe and to get to understand the ebb and flow and have those fortuitous meetings that happen, around the water cooler, all of that. Those actually, strangely enough, can happen in this kind of format if you make the opportunity. So yeah, I've changed from very old-fashioned to, and I'm making sure that we just don't drift back to what it was. What I'm not sure is what new normal is. I'm not pretending I do. It's something less than we were doing, for absolutely sure. The irony is that we'd rented a fancy new office that accommodated a very much larger, number than we've got now. But we're not going to go back to what we were. I enjoy the fact that I'm not stuck on a commute. I get a couple of hours of my life back a day, and for some other people, it's far, far more. So the business is in rude health, and we've found some better ways of working. It's not all perfect, but generally speaking, there's been some very significant learnings which will be a benefit for us and, frankly, the environment as well.
For most leaders in business, a lot of the job requires feeling where the issues are, self-briefing, finding out what's going on, listening to the vibrations, the little hot spots created. How do you do that when you're working?
Yeah, well, I have been traditionally a person that, as I said, tries to pick up the vibe. You go and have an impromptu chat. I've had to supplement that, or I've had to replace that with data. I'm finding I'm asking for far more reports on this, reports on that. I don't want the business to become all rigid and turgid, but in order to make decisions about things, in the absence of being able to go to, hey, John, what do you think about this? La, 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 la. I have to replace it with a lot more, please, can you present the data that supports my view that X, Y, Z? Or can you give me some data so that I can change this process or think about that? So yeah, it's become much more data oriented than conversational.
That's interesting. And we hear stories about strange things happening in HR, lots of which can't easily be translated into data. Have you seen any of those?
I mean, in some horrible way, this is an amazing social experiment that's absolutely fascinating to be part of. I don't know what new normal is going to be. I'm quite convinced that there are going to be issues related to this. There will be a fallout. I don't know what they will. I think there's going to be, you know, the very fact that the lines are blurred between work and home geographically, and, you know, people knocking on the door. I think that will have an effect. I don't know what it's going to be. I think some people are going to struggle, and did in the early days. We certainly witnessed people struggling and please can I come into the office, and we just couldn't accommodate it. And then some people have gotten used to this idea, and I can sense not wanting to get back. One thing I have found is that now we are spending more time together physically because we can. There have been HR issues that have so far not raised to the surface, and I think that's the release valve of being actually physically in the same place. That some things that normally you would deal with on a day-to-day basis, they've now been sort of compressed. So we're seeing a lot of people with concerns about their own private lives and job progressions, etc., coming up in a fairly short space of time. So it's been an interesting period over the last couple of weeks as we've begun to get back into more and more FaceTime, real FaceTime.
They say management is a bit like a waterbed. You know, you push the problems down here and they pop up somewhere else. Is that a case here? I mean, do you think it's been a net positive? I get the sense probably.
Yeah. I mean, if you can put the horrible backdrop behind, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for the environment, great. For people's, well, I mean, who wants to be in a commute? I can't think of anyone who enjoys the commute. So that is a real positive. That, you know, if you get an hour of your life back, 2 hours of your life back, that's positive. I found that I like the structure of this kind of meeting where it starts at 9:00 and ends at blah blah blah, because you've normally got one stacked up. Whereas in the real world, when you're meeting people face to face, they tend to get blurred at either end. People drift in late, or the meeting overruns. So I found that has been much more efficient. I think we've got through more weighty subjects in this period than ever before. And I believe that's partly due to you get people's heightened concentration for specific times, and then people have quickly adapted to subject switching very quickly, because you could be on from within 1 minute at the end of one meeting to the beginning of the next meeting, entirely different subjects. And I think on the most part, we've managed to do that really well.
Those are all that gives us a clear picture, I think, of what it's been like internally. Yeah. What would you say have been the changes to the way you're looking forward to the future, possibly, you know, externally? In what way is your view of the outlook different now from what it was before lockdown?
Well, in our particular business, we've got lots to be encouraged about. To some degree, this experience has given technology overall a shot of adrenaline. In other words, the acceptance of technology has been profound. You know, you're getting people like my mother adopting Zoom calls and things like that. And as a technology business, the idea of running cameras on people, I think, has generally just this surge in adoption of technology helps people get over the psychology of that. I can't speak to specifically what COVID has done to our market. I think, like anyone, I'm slightly nervous about what this will have done to government spending around the world. A lot of our customers are funded effectively through the government, so I wait nervously to see what the impact of raised levies and taxes and reduced spending might look like. So I'm afraid I don't have a crystal ball in respect to what the customer's going to do, but our market is rising, and I'm confident that the overall market rising will be greater than the downward pressure on budgets, etc. Well, that's what I'm hoping, at least.
And outside enforcement, and we all think of body cameras as being a police thing. I know that your company as opening up health education and retail.
Yeah.
What about those markets? I mean, if you were to pick 3 sectors that were affected by the virus, it would be health, education, and retail.
Yes, and not surprisingly, we're seeing different levels of activity. So, of course, education went from lots of lively conversations and trials and pilots, because it's in its infancy, to no one being there, literally. So you can imagine what was happening in that part of it. That is beginning to go again as people prepare for what's happening after the summer. In fact, we've sold quite a number to universities, etc. Healthcare obviously started looking elsewhere. Its mind went elsewhere for a while, but that's come back strongly. There's been a lot of tension in parts of the system. I think, people were generally very well behaved at the beginning. Boredom set in, and I've heard reports of quite a lot of aggression towards hospital staff. So that has helped us, because this is a great way of de-escalating in the first place. Retail, again, a bit similar to education. Their priorities went to how can I keep the lights on for a start, and then once the shop started opening again, it was back to the logistics of things. So again, there was definitely a pause in that, but we're seeing a resurgence in activity in all 3 basically.
So the world is very different, but it's not all negative.
No, I think it's positive. There are much more positives than negative, definitely, for us. There's uncertainty that wasn't there before, but to a degree, a business that has prevailed well. We've had our record half a year. I think the very fact that we've managed to make money through this period, we're hiring, we're growing, we're making investments in product and sales staff around the world. I think that will have left some of our competition in less healthy ways. So the net effect is that helps us.
Sounds good, doesn't it, Simon?
Yeah, absolutely, Alasdair. I think, I was very interested. You brought up the subject of being nimble and being flexible, and we've spoken kind of as a result of that, what you've been able to do positively and some of the negatives. But I was just wondering, if a fellow business leader maybe watching this, would want to know from you, what are the things that they should be considering to be more nimble, to be more flexible? From your experience, what would you suggest to them?
Well, the obvious things are the technology. I think we should all be able to run our business, whether it's from a beach in the Bahamas or our own living rooms. That goes without saying, and I'd be surprised if anyone hadn't cottoned on to that. Of course, it's difficult when you're physical goods and if you're baking cakes, and I get that, absolutely. But where you can, detach yourself from physical infrastructure as much as possible. So Wi-Fi connections and laptops gets us along the way there. As I say, I'm not sure what the new mentality is, so I think it's too early to call, for me personally, how to deal with employees. I'm not sure exactly, what's this going to mean to a new generation who are expecting to work from home most of their lives? I don't know whether it's going to become enshrined in HR law that it's, as you know, it's like it's air and water, it's a right to do that. I honestly don't know. And I don't really know what new normal looks like. Me personally, for our business, I don't think that I don't want us to be any more than half of the office staff around at any time. And we're just working through those numbers now. And I don't want us to drift back to what old habits used to be. It's very seductive. We'll have a meeting. Wouldn't it be better if then we can get around a whiteboard? But I'm actually throwing out whiteboards. I'm actually trying myself to teach myself how to do whiteboards on these kind of Zoom calls. And we're deliberately, even when we can, I'm forcing people to be separate rather than us all congregate in a meeting room, not just because of the social distancing, but because I think we need to learn those skills and not drift back. I don't want us to drift back. What I don't know is whether the customer's behavior is going to drift back.
Well, as usual, I'd like to thank Peter for his time, but especially today, I'd like to thank Alasdair for joining us today. I think we've had a really good conversation about some really practical issues about how how people are running businesses through the lockdown and how they're going to run businesses as we come out of the lockdown. So once again, Peter and Alasdair, many thanks for your time and thanks for contributing to this conversation. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Very much. Bye-bye.